It was one of those perfectly ordinary Saturday mornings that had always made me feel lucky. The kitchen smelled of warm Earl Grey tea and lightly toasted sourdough. Sunlight slanted through the half-open blinds, painting soft golden stripes across the wooden table where we had eaten breakfast together for 6 years of marriage. I sat in my favorite gray robe, the fabric soft and worn from countless lazy weekends, scrolling through the news on my phone with one hand while the other cradled the ceramic mug. The tea was the perfect temperature, hot enough to warm my palms but not scalding, and the steam curled lazily upward, carrying that familiar bergamot scent that always reminded me of our first apartment. Across the room, Lauren stood in front of the narrow hallway mirror, getting dressed for what she called a quick work brunch. She slipped into a crisp white blouse, the cotton whispering against her skin, then stepped into dark jeans that hugged her figure in that effortless way she had perfected. At 36 she still moved with the same graceful confidence that had first caught my eye 8 years ago, a PR specialist who could light up any room without even trying. She ran a hand through her dark hair, tilting her head slightly to check the angle, and I caught the faint scent of her vanilla citrus perfume drifting across the kitchen. Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be the guy typing this out at 2 a.m. with shaking hands, but here I am. My name is Ethan, 38, marketing manager at a mid-size agency downtown. Lauren and I had been together 8 years, married for 6. No kids yet, we kept saying next year, when the promotions settle. I was the steady one, the planner, the guy who still brought her coffee in bed every Saturday morning because I genuinely believed we were the couple everyone else envied. Calm, confident, the kind of marriage that felt bulletproof. That morning she turned from the mirror, caught my eye in the reflection, and smiled the same warm smile she'd given me for 8 years. Brunch with the team won't be long. Save me some tea. Her voice was light and playful, but her fingers lingered a second too long on the collar of her blouse, adjusting it with a tiny, almost nervous tug. I nodded, took another sip of tea, and tried to focus on the headline scrolling past on my screen. The apartment felt exactly as it always had, the low hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic noise filtering through the double-glazed windows, the faint creak of the floorboards under her bare feet as she moved. Everything looked perfectly normal. Except it wasn't. Because the night before, at the company happy hour bar downtown, I had heard her say something that was still ringing in my ears like a wrong note in a familiar song. The bar had been low-lit and cozy, the air thick with the scent of whiskey, citrus garnishes, and the faint metallic edge of rain that had just stopped outside. Leather booths creaked softly, jazz hummed through hidden speakers, and the amber lighting cast long shadows across the polished wood. I had been nursing a gin and tonic at our usual table, tie loosened after a long week, watching Lauren work the room the way only a PR specialist can, charming, magnetic, impossible to look away from. Her red dress from the night before had caught the light every time she laughed. Ryan, the new senior account lead, late 30s, expensive watch glinting on his wrist, easy confident smile, had been standing too close. I saw Lauren lean in, her fingers brushing his sleeve in that casual yet intimate way, and heard her whisper clearly over the music, "Ryan, you understand me like he never could." The words landed like ice water sliding down my back. She laughed right after, light and quick, as if it were nothing more than office banter. Ryan glanced my way, raised his glass in that fake bro salute, and she turned back to me with the same warm smile she always gave me. "Just work talk, babe. He's helping with the pitch." Now, watching her finish dressing in the quiet kitchen, the scent of her perfume mixing with the bergamot tea, I told myself I was imagining things. She was charming by nature, that was why clients loved her. That was why I had fallen for her. But when she walked over, leaned down, and kissed my cheek goodbye, her lips cool from the morning air, her phone buzzed once inside her bag. Ryan's name flashed on the screen before she silenced it with a casual swipe of her thumb. The tea suddenly tasted bitter on my tongue, sharper than usual, and the golden stripes of sunlight across the table seemed a little less warm. "Love you," she said softly, squeezing my shoulder. Her hand lingered just a fraction longer than normal, the way it used to when we were first dating and she didn't want to leave for work. Then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her, the faint click of her heels echoing down the hallway outside. I sat there for a long time, mug cooling in my hands, listening to the quiet apartment settle around me. The toaster popped up the last slice of sourdough with a cheerful ding that felt out of place. I buttered it slowly, the knife scraping against the crust, but I barely tasted it. My mind kept replaying that whisper at the bar, the way her fingers had brushed Ryan's sleeve, the easy laugh that followed. I told myself it was nothing. Work talk. She was a PR specialist, networking was literally her job. Ryan was new, ambitious, probably just trying to impress the team. I was the steady husband, the one who planned our vacations 6 months in advance and remembered to buy her favorite tea when it ran low. We were solid. 8 years together, 6 married, and not a single major fight that hadn't ended in laughter and make-up sex. This was just a momentary weird vibe. But that night, when Lauren came home a little after noon carrying a small paper bag from the brunch place, they had those almond croissants you like, and kissed me again, her perfume now mixed with the faint scent of someone else's cologne, I felt the first hairline crack in the glass. She unpacked the pastries, chatting brightly about the pitch and how Ryan had some great ideas, her movements fluid and confident. I smiled, nodded, asked the right questions. Inside, though, something small and cold had lodged in my chest, a tiny doubt that refused to dissolve in the warmth of our kitchen or the sweetness of the croissants. That evening we watched a movie on the couch, her head on my shoulder, the blanket we'd bought on our honeymoon draped over our legs. The city lights twinkled outside the window, the apartment cozy and familiar. Everything looked exactly the same as it had for 6 years of marriage. Yet the air in our living room felt thinner somehow, like the first faint tremor before a house you thought was solid begins to shift on its foundation. The next morning, she kissed me goodbye like always, same soft lips, same love you, but her eyes held something I couldn't quite name. A distance. A secret. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop replaying that whisper at the bar. Ethan begins in secure attachment, the classic, we're solid mindset that blinds even analytical minds like a marketing professional who reads consumer behavior for a living. Lauren's charming, attention-seeking personality has trained him over 8 years to normalize flirtation as just her job. The bar whisper plants immediate cognitive dissonance, his rational brain labels it work talk, while his gut registers the intimate tone and micro-gesture, fingers on sleeve. This internal split, trust versus emerging unease, sets the psychological foundation. Sensory details, tea steam, perfume, phone screen glow, mirror his shifting inner temperature, making the audience feel the exact moment confidence begins to fracture without any overt accusation yet. The weeks after that Saturday morning settled into a rhythm that should have felt normal but tasted slightly off, like milk left out too long on the counter. Lauren started working late, 3 or 4 nights a week, always with the same bright, convincing excuse, big pitch deadline, babe, you know how these clients are. She'd come home after 11, cheeks flushed from the cool night air, carrying the faint trace of the same cologne Ryan had worn at the bar. I would be on the couch reviewing campaign metrics, the blue glow of my laptop the only light in the living room, and she'd kiss my forehead too quickly, already reaching for her phone with that casual flick of her wrist. The apartment smelled of whatever takeout she'd grabbed on the way home, sometimes Thai, sometimes sushi, but underneath it lingered something sharper, something that didn't belong. She began guarding her phone more carefully. Screen brightness turned low, notifications silenced, and she started turning away slightly whenever a text came in. One Tuesday night I walked into the kitchen for a glass of water and she slammed the messaging app shut so fast the lock screen flashed white for a split second. Just Madison checking in about the weekend, she said, but her smile was a beat too late, the corners of her mouth tightening just enough for me to notice. Madison, her best friend since college, had been texting more than usual lately, always ready with the perfect backup story. Yeah, we grabbed drinks after her meeting, sorry we lost track of time. I wanted to believe her. I did believe her, most days. Madison had been at our wedding, she'd cried during the vows. Why would she lie? Outfits changed too, subtly at first. New silk blouses that hugged her figure a little more, the perfume she used to save for date nights now sprayed on every morning before work. She started girls' nights with Madison that somehow always stretched until 1 a.m. or later. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was the calm one in the relationship, the marketing guy who could read a room full of clients and still keeps cool. Overreacting would make me the insecure husband, the jealous type I had always sworn I'd never become. Yet every late-night text, every sudden silence when I entered the room, every perfectly controlled laugh at her phone added another invisible layer of weight to my chest. A red herring arrived when Nick, my old college roommate who now ran IT for our agency, mentioned over beers at our usual sports bar that Ryan had been burning the midnight oil, too. Probably just grinding on the same pitch, Nick shrugged, wiping foam from his upper lip. You know how competitive he is. Relief hit me so hard I actually laughed out loud, the sound echoing off the wooden beams. Of course. Work stress. That weekend Lauren suggested we go away for a night, just the two of us. We haven't done a proper date in ages. We drove to the lake cabin 2 hours outside the city, held hands on the dock while the sun set in streaks of orange and pink, and for 48 glorious hours everything felt like the first year again. She even left her phone in the car the entire time, something she hadn't done in months. We cooked pasta together, laughed over old stories, made love slowly under the quilt that smelled of pine and wood smoke. I felt the doubt melt away like ice in the sun. But Sunday night, back in our apartment, her phone buzzed at 2 a.m. She slipped out of bed so quietly I almost didn't notice, padding to the bathroom to answer in a low voice I couldn't quite make out. I pretended to sleep, heart hammering against my ribs, the sheets suddenly too warm. When she returned 15 minutes later, she smelled faintly of cigarette smoke. She had quit years ago, right after we got engaged. The scent clung to her hair and the collar of her sleep shirt. The next morning, she acted perfectly normal, humming while she made avocado toast, talking excitedly about our upcoming anniversary trip to the mountains. But when she kissed me goodbye at the door, her hand lingered on my cheek a second too long, thumb tracing my jawline as if she were memorizing the shape of my face. That night I sat alone in the dark living room after she had gone to bed, the city lights flickering through the half-closed blinds like distant stars. The apartment was quiet except for the soft ticking of the wall clock and the occasional hum of the refrigerator. I felt the first real crack in the foundation I had trusted for 8 years, not a dramatic earthquake, but a slow, steady pressure building behind my ribs. Something was wrong. I just didn't know how wrong yet. And for the first time, I wondered if I even wanted to find out. Lauren's mistake was layering small, believable lies, late pitches, Madison cover stories, that exploited Ethan's trust and her own PR hone charm. Ethan's mistake was classic denial, rationalizing every red flag as work stress, because admitting doubt felt like betraying the marriage he'd built his identity around. The lesson emerging is that attention-seeking behavior normalized over years creates perfect cover for escalation. Each successful deception lowers the emotional cost of the next. Nick's innocent comment and the late getaway temporarily reset Ethan's suspicion, teaching that red herrings aren't harmless, they buy the betrayer more time. These micro-mistakes accumulate into the exact psychological pressure that turns quiet unease into obsession. I became my own client, analyzing data I never wanted to see. As a marketing manager I knew patterns, now I tracked hers with the same precision I used for campaign metrics. Phone usage spiked between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. Credit card charges started appearing for a budget motel chain on the edge of town, never the same location twice, always paid in cash at checkout. I told myself it was client dinners, team offsites, anything but what my gut was screaming. The moral dilemma kept me awake for hours. Checking her phone would make me the villain, the husband who didn't trust his wife. Yet not checking felt like slow self-destruction, like watching a car drift toward a cliff and refusing to grab the wheel. Nick became my quiet ally without me even asking. Over late-night beers at the same sports bar where he'd first mentioned Ryan, he showed me how to read location pings without full phone access, just enough metadata to see patterns. I'm not proud of this, man, he said quietly, the neon beer sign reflecting in his glasses, but if it were my wife, one ping placed Lauren at the exact same motel Ryan had checked into the night before. Relief and nausea fought in my chest like two boxers in the same ring. I drove past the motel during my lunch break the next day, the car's air conditioning blasting cold air against my face, but saw nothing, just rows of identical doors and a half-empty parking lot. I told myself coincidence. Work. Nothing more. A new red herring arrived when Madison called me directly one afternoon while I was stuck in traffic. Her voice was warm and concerned. "Lauren's just stressed about the promotion, Ethan. She's been crashing at my place after late strategy sessions, you know how intense things are right now." I believed her. Madison had never lied to me in all the years I'd known her. For 3 full days I relaxed, the knot in my stomach loosening. I even surprised Lauren with flowers when she got home, the lilies filling the apartment with their sweet scent. She hugged me tight, eyes shining, and for a moment everything felt right again. Then I found the hotel receipt. It was tucked deep in the side pocket of Lauren's gym bag while she was in the shower, the water running loud enough to cover the rustle of paper. Same motel chain. Same night Madison had sworn they were together. The paper felt cold and heavy in my hand. I folded it carefully and put it back exactly where I found it, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Psychological strain set in hard after that. I barely slept, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazy circles, the sheets twisted around my legs. Every gesture Lauren made, touching my arm while we cooked, laughing at my jokes over dinner, felt rehearsed, like lines from a script she had practiced in the mirror. One rainy afternoon I sat in my car outside the agency building, rain streaking the windshield like tears, and watched her and Ryan leave together through the glass lobby doors. They didn't touch, but the way she tilted her head toward him, the way her laughter carried across the parking lot, carried the same intimate energy I had seen at the bar months earlier. That night she came home glowing, spinning a long story about a breakthrough on the pitch and how the client had finally signed. The lie was so smooth, so perfectly delivered, it almost convinced me again. But the photos I found hidden in a deleted folder on her cloud backup later that week, taken in a motel mirror, her smile wide and carefree, Ryan's arm around her waist, told the truth no excuse could touch. I stared at them until the screen blurred with unshed tears, the apartment suddenly ice-cold despite the heating running full blast. The vanilla citrus perfume she had worn that morning now smelled like betrayal. I was fracturing, half the man who still loved her, half the detective who could no longer look away. Proof wasn't enough anymore. I needed the moment it became impossible to deny. The first irreversible stage is the motel receipt, tangible evidence that reframes every "work late" excuse. The second is Nick's location data crossing into active surveillance, a moral line Ethan can never uncross. Madison's cover story functions as the third stage, temporarily restoring hope only to heighten the crash when the photos surface. The point of no return arrives when Ethan chooses not to confront immediately. Instead, he keeps gathering, revealing his deepening attachment to certainty over the relationship. These stages illustrate how investigation becomes addictive, turning love into evidence collection and making every earlier red herring feel like deliberate betrayal. I followed her the night of the emergency client dinner. She kissed me goodbye wearing the same red dress from the bar night months earlier, perfume fresh and sweet, eyes bright with something I now recognized as anticipation. "Don't wait up if it runs late," she said lightly, squeezing my hand. I waited exactly 20 minutes after the door clicked shut, then drove the route Nick had traced for me on a crumpled map. The motel on the outskirts of town glowed under harsh yellow security lights, the air thick with diesel fumes and damp pavement from an earlier rain. My hands were steady on the wheel, the same calm I used in boardrooms when a campaign was falling apart. I parked in the shadow of an old delivery truck, engine off, windows cracked just enough to let the cool night air in. 20 minutes later Ryan's sleek black car pulled into the lot. Lauren stepped out of hers almost immediately, walking straight into his arms without hesitation. They kissed, slow, familiar, the kind of kiss that said this had happened many, many times before. My vision tunneled to that single point. I pulled out my phone with shaking fingers, zoomed in, and recorded 30 clear seconds of video that would end everything we had built. Back at the apartment, I waited on the couch in the dark, city lights flickering through the blinds like indifferent witnesses. The refrigerator hummed softly in the kitchen, the only sound besides my own shallow breathing. When Lauren walked in at 1:17 a.m., lipstick slightly smudged and hair a little less perfect than when she left, she froze the moment she saw me sitting there. I didn't speak at first. I simply pressed play on the video and turned the screen toward her. The color drained from her face in the dim light. "Ethan. How long?" My voice stayed calm, the same measured tone I used in client crisis calls when everything was burning down. She sank slowly onto the chair opposite me, tears already spilling down her cheeks. The silence stretched, broken only by the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant siren somewhere outside. 3 months, she whispered finally. It started as just drinks after work. He listened when I felt invisible at home. You were always so focused on your campaigns, your metrics, your next promotion. Ryan made me feel seen. I laid out the screenshots I had printed earlier, explicit messages, motel receipts, the mirror photos, spreading them across the coffee table like evidence in a case I never wanted to win. You told him I never understood you. You planned entire weekends while I thought you were with Madison. You looked me in the eye every morning and lied. She reached for my hand across the table, I pulled away. I never stopped loving you, Ethan. This was a mistake. A stupid, selfish mistake. We can fix this. Couples therapy, time off, anything. Please. The woman sitting across from me was no longer the Lauren I had married. The charming, attention-seeking mask had cracked wide open, revealing someone who had chosen excitement and validation over the life we had carefully built together. I stood up slowly, the motion feeling final, the floorboards creaking under my weight. No. We can't. The silence that followed was heavier than any shout could ever be. The apartment felt suddenly foreign, our couch where we had watched 100 movies, our photos on the walls, our life together, all belonging to a version of us that no longer existed. Everything we had was already gone, we were just the last 2 people on earth to admit it. Ethan's restrained anger, channeled through professional composure, produces the calm presentation of video evidence that forces immediate confession, preserving his dignity where rage would have destroyed dialogue. Lauren's tears and blame shifting, "You were always so focused," reveal her manipulative personality stripped bare, now weaponized in a final bid for forgiveness. The physical act of playing the video connects internal devastation to undeniable proof, collapsing 3 months of gaslighting in one quiet moment. This emotion-to-action pivot marks the exact point where love detaches. Ethan's humiliation crystallizes into clarity the instant she says, "We can fix this," proving that knowledge, not volume, severs the bond forever. The days after the confrontation blurred into a cold, courteous limbo that felt worse than any fight we had ever had. Lauren moved her things into the guest room without being asked. I took on extra projects at the agency, coming home only to shower and leave again, the apartment echoing with drawers closing too softly and the coffee maker hissing at odd hours. We spoke in careful, logistical sentences: who would keep the lease, how to split the joint savings account we had built together, whether we should tell our families yet or wait until the dust settled. Madison called me 3 days later, her voice shaking with guilt. "I knew something was off, Ethan." She swore it was nothing serious. I covered for her because she's my best friend. "I'm so sorry." Her admission landed like a second punch. The woman who had stood beside us at our wedding had helped hide the affair out of misplaced loyalty. Nick showed up unannounced one evening with a 6-pack and very little conversation. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just sat on the couch, handed me a beer, and let the silence do the talking. The betrayal had rippled outward, touching even our closest circle of friends and turning every shared memory slightly sour. Lauren tried to repair things in waves. She left handwritten notes on the kitchen counter: "I'm starting therapy this week. I love you." She cooked my favorite Thai curry one night, the apartment filling with lemongrass and coconut milk, but I ate standing at the sink, the food tasting like cardboard. Each gesture felt rehearsed, like another PR campaign she was trying to sell. I attended one couple's counseling session because she begged. The therapist, a calm woman in her 50s, asked what I needed. Space, I answered honestly, my voice steady. Lauren nodded, tears falling silently, but I saw the fear in her eyes for the first time, the realization that her charm and persuasive words had finally run out of currency. I consulted a lawyer quietly the following week. The papers were drawn up with clinical precision. The night I slid the folder across the kitchen table, she cried again, but this time without the dramatic tilt of her head or the practiced tremble in her voice. "I never thought you'd actually leave," she whispered, staring at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. I looked at the woman I had loved for 8 years and felt only the faint echo of that love, like a favorite song slowly fading out of range on an old radio. The morning I packed the last box, I removed my wedding ring and placed it gently on the kitchen counter beside her keys. The metal clicked against the granite, a small, final sound that seemed to echo through the entire apartment. I walked out into the cool morning air, the same city streets we had walked together 1,000 times now carrying the clean scent of possibility and new beginnings. The apartment stayed behind me in the rearview mirror, growing smaller with every mile until it disappeared completely. Ethan expected the confrontation to either save the marriage through honesty or explode in dramatic rage. Reality delivered quiet paperwork and dignified separation. He had imagined Lauren's charm would eventually win him back. Instead, her attempts at repair only highlighted how long she had practiced emotional manipulation. The contrast between his prediscovered vision of a growing future and the post-confrontation reality of separate leases forced a painful awakening. The marriage he thought was solid had been partly performance. This gap stripped away the final denial, replacing it with the quiet certainty that self-respect required divorce. 8 months later the divorce was final. I kept the apartment, Lauren moved into a smaller place closer to the agency. The first weeks alone were raw and disorienting, an empty closet where her clothes used to hang, silent evenings with no one to share the day's stories, the refrigerator stocked only with things I liked. The silence used to feel heavy, now it felt like space to breathe. Slowly, new routines took root. I started boxing at the gym Nick recommended, hitting the heavy bag until my shoulders burned and sweat stung my eyes, every punch releasing another layer of the man who had ignored the signs for so long. Madison and I still talk, careful, honest conversations that have rebuilt a friendship on truth rather than secrets. She apologized again last month over coffee, and for the first time I was able to tell her I forgave her without the words catching in my throat. Nick became my regular weekend hiking partner. We don't rehash the past anymore, we just walk the trails, talk about sports or work or nothing at all, the crunch of leaves under our boots the only soundtrack we need. I even went on a few dates, nothing serious yet, just coffee and conversation with women who made me laugh without performing. The fact that I could do it at all felt like the biggest victory. I learned that betrayal doesn't destroy you, it reveals you. The version of Ethan who dismissed every late night, every secret smile, every whispered excuse is gone. In his place stands someone who trusts his instincts again, who understands that love without honesty is just comfortable performance. I still carry the faint scar of what happened, but scars are proof that you survived and kept moving forward. Today the apartment feels larger, filled with my choices. Morning light slants through the same windows we used to share, but now it warms a space that belongs only to me. I wake up earlier, make my own Earl Grey tea, and sit on the small balcony watching the city wake up. The air smells cleaner somehow. For the first time in 8 years, I wake up knowing exactly who I am and where I'm going, steady, clear-eyed, and finally free. Across the entire arc, Ethan's journey from blind trust to empowered independence illustrates how betrayal, while devastating, can function as the catalyst for authentic self-reclamation. The cumulative lessons: never ignore intuitive red flags, charm can mask manipulation, and composure in crisis preserves dignity, emerge not as abstract morals but as lived truths forged in sensory moments. Bar whiskey scent, motel video glow, boxing bag impacts. Lauren's attention-seeking secrecy and Ryan's presence exposed the fragility of emotional infidelity layered over repeated microdeceptions, while Madison's cover and Nick's quiet support added layers of loyalty and friendship that ultimately strengthened Ethan's new circle. His growth is clearest in the contrast between his early rationalizations and final quiet confidence. He no longer needs the illusion of perfection because he now honors reality. The story closes not in bitterness but in relief, proving that freedom after betrayal is not the absence of pain, it is the presence of self-ownership. Situations like this happen more often than we admit, yet Ethan's choice to rebuild independently shows that the aftermath can become the most honest chapter of all.